What's up, you guys, and welcome back to the Televised podcast. My name is Anna, and today we're going to be talking about Wonder Woman 1984. This is a movie that I really liked, and I wanted to talk about it because I think there's a lot of takes on this movie. Like, people have a lot of things to say about this movie. I think there was a lot of people who maybe were disappointed by this movie. Maybe were, I don't know, expecting something different from this movie. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I really did like it, and I will, kind of get into talking about the things that I really did like about it, and also I do have some issues with it, and I will talk about that as well. And for this though, I ended up I rewatched the first movie, the first Wonder Woman, because I just wanted to refresh myself on the first one. And I think definitely that one was not without its problems either, definitely had its fair share of issues. I mean, no movie is perfect. No movie will ever be perfect. No movie can ever be perfect. So obviously the first movie did have its issues, and I think even in this movie, Patty Jenkins worked to rectify those mistakes that she made in the first one, but then ended up making some people mad. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about with this movie. I'm gonna try and keep this not too crazy or rambly or super long, just because I feel like this is kind of like happiest season. I don't want to say that, but where there's a lot of discourse around this movie that can be really exhausting, and I just kind of want to highlight some of the good things about this movie, and maybe not necessarily remind, but kind of offer a more positive look on the movie. Not that I feel like the response was overwhelmingly negative, but it was definitely lukewarm, And honestly, there's reasons that I think that happened, and I'm definitely going to get into that too. But first, I just want to talk about kind of the upcoming schedule for what I'm going to be doing on the podcast. Batwoman is starting up again soon. It's coming back in 5 days. Holy crap, that's awesome. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to get back into watching TV every single week, you know what I mean? Having something to watch, having something to think about, something to talk about. It feels like it's been so long, and it has been so long. I mean, for me, one of the only things that I've been watching live this year, for the past 6 months, is Station 19, but that was only back for 5 episodes, and then they went on a break, and they won't be back until I think February. So it definitely feels like I'm ready to get back into watching live television, and I'm excited about it. That being said, Batwoman, because it is coming back before Supergirl, I'm going to do weekly Batwoman recaps. I hope you guys enjoy. I know that when I've done solely Batwoman recaps in the past, they weren't super popular, but I do want to talk about the show, and I love the show so much, and I hope that more people are kind of excited about the show now that Ruby Rose is gone, because I know that a lot of people were definitely wary of Ruby Rose and of her acting skills and of just kind of the show in general, which is really disappointing, because obviously all of the other characters and the other actors really just carried that show for the first season. Not to say that Ruby didn't do anything, because she did, and Kate Kane was such a cool and important character, but I'm really excited, and I do see a lot of excitement around Ryan Wilder, which is really cool. So I will be talking about Batwoman every Wednesday after the episode will air on Sunday, and I'm gonna put out a Batwoman recap on Wednesday. I might incorporate some other stuff that I want to talk about maybe into those episodes. Maybe if I feel particularly interested in talking about Dickinson, I might talk about that, because new episodes are coming out every Friday for Dickinson, I think for the next 7 weeks or so. And then what else is coming out? Nancy Drew is coming back, which I'm really, really thrilled about. That's such a great show. If you haven't watched it, the whole first season is on HBO Max if you wanted to check it out. It's so good, so awesome. Riverdale is coming back. I don't know if I'll ever talk about Riverdale, but I do like Riverdale, so I'm excited for that to return. And what else? Oh, probably when Superman and Lois first drops, like I'll probably watch the pilot episode and do kind of like a mini review on it just to talk about some stuff. You know, I have not good. It doesn't look good. The outlook is drear for sure for about Superman and Lois. So I'll probably just like incorporate that into the Batwoman recap whenever that happens, because they don't air until February, I don't think. So yeah, I hope that's cool with everyone. I'm probably gonna take a break on the because normally every once in a while, like once a month or so, I would put out like a Saturday episode, kind of unrelated to whatever show that I'm currently reviewing, whether that was Supergirl or now Batwoman. But I probably will take a break from that until Dickinson is over, just because that's the only thing, unless something comes out that just like blows my mind, but that's the only thing on the like immediate horizon that I could see myself wanting to do like a separate sit down episode about. So that will probably be the next episode that's not related to Batwoman. So, and I hate to do this because it just feels like I'm like booting people off the ship. Like if they don't watch Batwoman, but I don't know what else to do. Like I want to talk about Batwoman, and I do feel like it deserves to be talked about because it's a really great show. But like I said, I'm more of a Supergirl podcast, and I always have been, but it's not airing right now, so it's like what else am I supposed to do? But yeah, I guess just let me know if people are interested in hearing about Batwoman, especially because I like I said, I think that there's a lot more hype around season 2 than there was about season 1, so I hope that people are interested in listening to a recap and me talking about the episodes and reviews and stuff. So yeah, just let me know. You could leave me a comment if you're watching on YouTube, or you could tweet me at TelevisedPod. I also, on my Twitter, I have a curious cat. You can send me an anonymous thing if you don't want to at me, then let me know what you think about me doing Batwoman episodes there. This was kind of the plan that I'd been like formulating for a while, and I think I talked about it before that I would do Batwoman solely episodes, but it's definitely right around the corner now. So like next Wednesday will be my Batwoman premiere recap, which is really cool and really fun, and I'm excited to get back to doing weekly stuff, but it's just like, I don't know if I have the audience for it. So I hope I do. Let me know. Sorry for all of this like rambling and ranting, but yeah, just let me know. So anyway, back to Wonder Woman 1984. Like I said, I think that this movie had an uphill battle in two ways. First of all, it had an uphill battle because the first movie was so revered. Even though the first Wonder Woman movie had its issues, which to say, I'm not saying that it's like, oh, it's horrible because it had these issues. Obviously, I love the first Wonder Woman movie, and I think it's a really awesome movie. And like I said before, there's no movie without issues, and one of the main issues of that first movie was the villain in the end. It kind of turned into like a big CGI, like big giant fight that nobody really cared about. At least I had you have a hard time caring about a villain that you haven't spent a lot of time with, that kind of like came out of nowhere, and so that was definitely an issue with the first movie that definitely a lot of reviewers pointed out at the time and were like, the third act was a little bit, but the rest of the movie was great. That's kind of what they said. And I think that Patty definitely worked to fix that in this movie, which ended up making some fans be like, well, what is all of this? But but I think she did a good job of kind of like listening and taking that in. so that was like the first hurdle, was kind of getting over the insane expectations that people had placed onto this movie. This movie was supposed to come out 2 years ago, I think, because it originally was scheduled for a 2019 release until they decided to push it back. And then obviously it was supposed to come out in June of 2021, and then it did not. It kept getting pushed, obviously, because and that's obviously no fault of the of anyone involved. It was obviously just our world situation, but because of that, I think it kind of drove anticipation even further and kind of bumped expectation even higher, just because it had been so long since the first one came out that people were like, okay, well, now it's got to be like 10,000 times better than the first one, you know? And also, I think maybe people really not romanticize, but like hold the first one so high on a pedestal that there was no way that this movie could ever touch it, you know? Because like there was no way that Patty could replicate the feeling of seeing basically the first female superhero movie, you know, in this new age of superhero movies that we have. That was the first one, you know, it's the first one for the DCEU, and then first one before even the MCU had their own female solo superhero movie. And so the hype behind the first Wonder Woman movie, and the feeling that the audience left with, and the, you know, everything about it was kind of this perfect storm to make it such a beloved movie. Obviously, on top of that it was a really good movie. But that's just to say that it kind of got maybe like obviously held like such a high place in the hearts and minds of the audience that this next one, I think it was inevitable that it would kind of fall a little flat, or like, you know, at least in comparison to expectations. Like when I rewatched this movie, I thought it was so much better on the rewatch because I let go of all of those expectations that I had, all of those hopes and dreams that I thought that could happen in this movie, all of the, things that I had anticipated happening, or ways that I wanted the storyline to go, or me just like waiting for something to happen and I wasn't even sure what, you know what I mean? Just like that, those expectations weren't there the second time that I watched it. And so I enjoyed it a lot more. And I thought it was, I was able to kind of like remove the, like pull back the veil and kind of see it with new eyes, you know, on the second time, and be like, yeah, this is a good movie. Like, obviously I don't love it as much as the first one. Like I said, same thing for me. I really hold that first movie up high on a pedestal, but I think that this one is really strong, and it's a really cool sequel to that first movie. And then the second hurdle that I think that this movie had to face was the fact that most people watched it at home. And that might sound really ridiculous, really stupid, and you might say, well, it's the same movie whether you watch it at home or on a big screen. And absolutely that is true, but you can't deny that the theatrical experience changes how you view a movie. It does. It changes how you're experiencing that movie, especially a movie like this, where for me, I got to see it in the theater. I was lucky enough that my local theaters are open. I know that that's not the case for a lot of people, and that's really sad, and that's really unfortunate that they couldn't see this movie on a big screen. But my local theaters are open, so I went the day after Christmas on Saturday, and I went with my mom, and we sat in the theater, and it was sold out. Obviously, they only sell tickets to like 40% capacity, so there was not really all that many people in there, but it definitely looked sold out for, you know, like 40%. And it was really such a fun experience, because obviously there's that scene where Diana like is, you know, lassoing on the lightning, and that is such a theatrical scene that you want to see in the theater, you know, and the moment with the invisible jet, that was so fun to like anticipate in the theater and then see it, you know. And it was just fun to watch it in the theater. And I cried with my mom, when Steve died again. And, to have the experience of experiencing all those emotions with all of these people that are around you, it heightens the experience and it makes it more fun. And so I think that, unfortunately, with this movie being released, at home more so than in a theater, and more people seeing it online, or like even, I'm sure that there are people out there who watched it on their phone, like that's the tiniest screen that you could find. And this movie was made for a gigantic screen. It was made to be a summer blockbuster popcorn movie, and I think that definitely kind of had an impact on the way that people watched this movie and the way that people felt about it, which you could say is dumb or whatever, but I don't know. I really think so. I think that if I hadn't been able to go see it in the theater like the first time, obviously I probably would have liked it as much and loved it as much, but I don't know. Some of those scenes, it's like, yes, you're in the theater and Diana's like running down Pennsylvania Avenue or wherever she was running. I can't remember. She was running through DC and you're like, yes, and the cheetah fight on the big screen was so cool. And it was a really, really cool film to experience in the theater. 'Cause I mean, like I said, that's how these movies are meant to be consumed. And it just makes me sad that Warner is doing this kind of simultaneous release for seemingly all of their movies for the foreseeable future. And I just hope that the theaters can survive long enough for everybody to get back to them. That's my main concern. So if you live somewhere and your theaters are open and you passed on this movie the first time, I would go check out your local AMC, go watch it in the theater. It made a big difference. They're being really safe at all these AMCs, like cleaning everything. Masks are required the whole entire time. Everybody's really spaced out. I felt really safe doing it. Obviously, if that's not feasible for you, then I'm sorry. But I definitely think that if you have the opportunity, if you feel comfortable, it's definitely a movie worth seeing on the big screen if you haven't already. One thing that I loved about this movie was how Patty leaned into the 80s aspect of this movie. The beginning, like almost the entire first act feels like a cheesy 80s movie, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really fun. I thought that, in the same way that the first one felt like a war movie, this one felt like a cheesy 80s movie. And you're like, yeah, I believe that this is the 80s and that, she's swinging around saving the bride from who fell off the bridge and saving that little girl in the mall. I thought that was really smart, and I thought it was really fun because I think, Patty is such an interesting filmmaker in that way, where she knows what she's doing and she knows what she wants to execute and how she wants to execute it. And it just felt like it was very nostalgic, even though obviously it's this brand new movie that I'd never seen before. I'm like, man, this feels so nostalgic, kind of like a comfort vibe that you get coming from that first act. And I really, really enjoyed that. Also, I think some of the goofier moments in the movie, maybe, that scene where obviously the mall scene, and then with Barbara when she goes to the gym, that was kind of a goofy moment, and Steve trying on all the outfits and the invisible jet, all of those kind of moments came together to add to that kind of cheesy aspect of the movie that I really enjoyed. I thought worked really, really well. Especially the invisible jet scene. I thought that was so cool. I was so excited. I was so hyped in the theater. I knew it was coming, and the way that Patty does things, especially suit reveals or the reveal of the invisible jet, she leads up to it and teases it and stuff. And I was like, just show me the invisible jet. And she did, and it was so good. It was so good. So obviously there's a very hotly debated aspect of this movie, and that is the return of Steve Trevor and Diana's storyline with him. I think that this movie does an insanely good job establishing how alone, isolated, and genuinely trapped in the past Diana is. Because the thing is that the way that Patty makes movies, she's not going to tell you anything. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't want to have to use dialogue to point stuff out. So she does it in some brilliant little ways that I think people kind of glossed over. By showing pictures of her with that at like Trevor Ranch, to show that she's still obviously thinking about Steve all the time, and her with Etta, the older picture with her and Etta when she's older, and we then assume that she has since passed away. And it's interesting because obviously that's a part of immortality that is really interesting, and a lot of heroes, even though definitely not all heroes are immortal, but with the ones that are, it feels like some of these storylines are kind of shied away from. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a Superman story tackle his immortality, or at least the fact that he will most definitely outlive Lois and all of his friends and his coworkers and everything. He's going to outlive every single one of them. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about this movie, was that they showed Diana. They showed the consequences of being Diana, of Themyscira, of being a demigod, of being immortal. And like I said, that's something that I feel like a lot of superhero movies have kind of shied away from, because they want to focus on, at least in the Superman realm. I mean, hell, they just made a show called Superman and Lois. Like, they want to focus on that dynamic duo, but they don't want to talk about the fact that he's going to outlive her. For sure. He's aging much, much slower than she is, and he will eventually have to bury her when he still looks like he's 30, and she was maybe, maybe she dies in her 90s, and that's really an upsetting revelation. Especially, it's kind of the same with Supergirl, thinking about how Kara is going to outlive Alex and potentially Nia and Wynn and Lena and all of these other characters, and Kelly and James and everyone. She's going to outlive all of her friends. She's going to have to watch them all grow old and die, and she's going to have to keep going. And that's one thing that I appreciate about this movie. Like I said, they were able to tackle that story, and about how Diana, refuses to move forward. She refuses to let herself live in the present because she's so stuck in the past. And I think that it just made so much sense, and especially after rewatching that first movie, seeing as Steve, he was her first positive human interaction, her first positive experience, with humanity, and really her only positive experience with humanity besides maybe, Etta and Charlie and all of those people. Everything else was pretty shit. The war, all of that. It was terrible. And he ended up obviously sacrificing himself before they could really ever do anything. And she was kind of left in limbo with him. She didn't have closure. And also, growing up on Themyscira, everybody is immortal on Themyscira, or at least lives for thousands upon thousands of years. So Diana has never really had to deal with loss in that way. She's never had to grieve. She's never had to process any of those emotions related to people that she loves dying. She's never had to do that. I mean, really, the only person that passed away that we know of in her entire lifetime was Antiope. And she didn't even really get to mourn her. She had to go off and fight because she wanted to avenge her. But the thing is that Diana, she never really learned how to move on, I don't think. On Themyscira, they never had to deal with any of that, any kind of death in that way. At least Diana didn't. She wasn't ever exposed to that, so she didn't know any kind of coping mechanism. And with the way that she shut herself off from the world, it seems, I don't think she had any interest to learn. She was kind of content to just live with the ghost of Steve. she didn't think that people were worth it. And that's so interesting. And it's why that picture of Etta is so important, because obviously Diana stuck with her for so long, up until she died, and then was forced to move on with her life, and move to the United States. And it's the type of story that lends itself to this character, because it's a struggle so personal to Diana, her immortality and her inexperience with human emotion, and with mortality, and with having to move on and deal with it. She doesn't have anybody. After Etta died, it's assumed that she just moves to the United States and doesn't contact anybody again, And that's so sad. Like, she obviously doesn't have her family. She made the choice to leave Themyscira, and she can never go back. And it's just, like, I thought it was really upsetting and really interesting, because it's her immortality mixed with her distrust of humanity. It, like, forces her into isolation, and she, like, does what she can to save people, because she always still believes in love and believes in humanity and believes that humans can be better and that they deserve to be saved, but she doesn't feel like it's worth it because she doesn't want to be hurt anymore. And that's why I really loved her story with Barbara in this movie. I feel like she kind of saw the best parts of Steve in Barbara. Like, that's why and so I think that that's why Barbara was the first person that she really opened up to, since literally all of her friends have passed away, and it seems like, she hasn't made any new friends in all of that time. And I thought that was so cool, because Diana saw someone just as lonely as her, saw how bright her light was and how kind her heart was, and decided that she was worth the pain of inevitably losing her. And that's why I think her story is potentially, Barbara's, going to continue into Wonder Woman 3. But we'll talk about that later. I've got some theories. But speaking of Cheetah and speaking of Barbara, her story was obviously kind of one of the more unresolved aspects of the film. But I think that she'll be back, which is why I think they kind of got away with that in my mind. Like, I let them get away with leaving Barbara a little bit open-ended, because I genuinely feel like she's going to be back for the third movie. So I kind of was like, okay, I'll let you get away with that. But I do understand why people have valid criticisms about Barbara's storyline and how it kind of felt unfinished. But so I do understand that. One thing that I did appreciate was that throughout the film, we obviously see Barbara and Max wishing and wishing and wishing, and even Diana does too, and clearly she has a hard time letting go of her wish, but in the end, she does. Like, she lets go of that wish, and it's because she's Wonder Woman, and she has to. Of course she would. She has this heart of gold, and she always does what's right, so of course she's selfless enough to let Steve go again. And that's why I think Barbara and Max are kind of more, they're like the audience inserts kind of in this movie, because, like, I don't know about y'all, but it would be really hard to give up that kind of wish. Look at Barbara. Like, she felt so powerless in her whole life, felt so powerless and invisible. And all of a sudden people talk to her and people pay attention to her, and she is powerful and she can defend herself and she can do everything that she never thought she'd be able to do. And then and then Diana's asking her to give it all up. Like, it's an extremely relatable idea. And that's what I liked about this movie is that they made it so that the characters, the villains of the movie are, yes, they're selfish and they do things that are almost unforgivable, but they're not. Like, Max still gets to be redeemed in the end, which is just a message about humanity and how people make mistakes, but there is a coming back from them, which I really appreciated, because it's like, for them to take these two villains, and especially Max specifically, and make him redeemable and make him, even though he says, yes, I did horrible things, and he tells his son, when you hear about me, I'm not going to say that I didn't do them, because I did. but just know that I love you, despite all of these awful things that I did. I decided to stop because I love you and because I wanted to make sure that you had a good life with me. I really appreciated that. And that kind of harkens back to the idea of that first movie, having that villain that wasn't very fleshed out. We kind of met him at the end, and it was like, oh, okay. But this time you have this villain who is so complex and so interesting, and we follow him as he kind of devolves into madness. And that's why I think her speech about, Max, you don't have to do this. You can be with your son. This is not what life is like. This is not the truth. I thought that was so cool, and it worked so much better for me than the finale of the first movie, which I just thought was really awesome. And I think Patty did a wonderful job of taking that criticism from the first movie and applying it to this movie. But then obviously people kind of were like, why did Max have so much screen time? But like, you have to, in order to have a good movie, you have to have characters that are all developed. And don't you want Wonder Woman to fight a actually well-developed and interesting character rather than like an idea that they kind of just threw out at the end? You know what I mean? Like, it's more of a service to Diana to place her against a character that is well-rounded and is, intricately crafted. Like, because then she has somebody to go up against that feels fleshed out and feels like a foe to her in a way, because she can't figure out how to manage the selfishness. She can't figure out how to appeal to humanity and get them to not be selfish. Like, that's what she's trying to do, and it's so interesting, and it made me think of Supergirl. The finale of this Wonder Woman movie made me think of many Supergirl finales where the answer is not found with your fist. The answer is not found with beating the hell out of people you don't like. It's found by understanding and having compassion and hope and reaching out and appealing to people's hearts. And I really loved that. I loved that, especially, in an age where, we see a lot of villains get the tar beat out of them. I thought that this one worked really well. I thought it was really cool. And I also thought it was smart of Patty to kind of chip away at Diana's powers for this movie. Because when you have a character who is quite literally a god, it's hard to write those characters into situations where any kind of struggle would be believable. And so I totally understand, like, taking her powers away, because then there can be ups and downs to her story and to this story as a whole. And to put her powers, I thought this was interesting, because to put her powers, which are, obviously the tool that she uses to help people and to save humanity, up against her love for Steve and her desire to, like, still be with him, it was a cool choice. And it made Diana choose between what is essentially, a ghost, Steve's ghost, like a memory from the past, and what Steve had actually wanted for her. Like, he believed in her heroism so much. His dying wish was basically, I can save today, you can save the world. And she ultimately knew that she would rather carry on with Steve in her heart and helping to save the world, rather than hang on to Steve's ghost and try and hope and want to have them back, And I thought that was really interesting, because it felt like Diana was choosing not only the better option for her, because obviously she knew that in order to do what she has to do, she had to give up Steve, but she was also choosing the better option for Steve, because then, he says it in the movie, he's like, I had a good life and I enjoyed my time with you, and I'm so thankful that we got this time, but now you have to go and you have to move on and you have to do what you need to do. And I loved that she kind of then decided, you know what? It was what Steve wanted for me. His dying wish, back in the 20s or 1918 kind of. back then, you know, it's what he wanted for me, so I'm gonna do it. So circling back to Diana and Barbara for a second, I'm just gonna say that I ship them so hard. I think that they worked so well together, and they could make a really cool couple if they go there in the third one. Because there was moments in the film where Diana was like clearly like jealous of Max and Barbara, and like there was so many like flirty moments or like couple tropes that you saw, like when she saved Barbara or like when she picked up Barbara's papers. And you can't tell me that the dinner date that they had wasn't a date, because it was. And I also loved how Diana tried to emotionally appeal to Barbara and how she asked where her heart and her warmth went. And that's kind of where I see, Diana seeing parts of Steve in Barbara, because she loved Steve for his heart and for his selflessness and for, every good thing that he has ever done that she saw him do. And that's what I think that she saw in Barbara. And to me, seeing Diana so defeated in that moment, it was so heartbreaking, and it showed that also that she is a flawed character and she can make mistakes, and it brings her down to that human level that people can relate to and people can understand. And I thought that worked really well. For me, I thought that this sequel worked just really well, especially after watching the two movies back to back. You can see the through lines of hope and humanity and compassion through each of them. And I think people are being harsh on this movie. They should revisit the first one, because I don't think that it's as perfect as you remember it being. Like I said before, kind of was held up on a pedestal. And to me, Patty kind of took the things that needed to be kind of tweaked and did that in this movie. And I just thought that it worked really well as a sequel, because it was able, like I was talking about earlier, it was able to show the consequences of immortality and the consequences also of kind of shutting yourself off. Like, Diana was so vulnerable to the stone, to her own wish. And that's the thing. That's the whole thing in the movie. Everybody was so vulnerable because of the idea of want. And that is another thing that was really cool about setting this movie in the 80s, because obviously that was like the peak of consumerism. Obviously we still are in consumerism, but like it really kicked off in the 80s when people are like, it's just want. People want more. And I thought that was really a cool idea to say, hey, look, we're going to set this movie in the 80s at the height of consumerism and of want, like insatiable want. And we're going to give people the ability to have whatever they want. And I thought it was really cool, and it worked really well for me. And I also loved how Diana was clearly always trying to stay out of the spotlight. She smashed security cameras in the mall in order to stay as hidden as possible. And I think that's such an interesting take on a superhero in the modern day. Even though obviously the movie took place back in the day, it's still, in our modern scope of when we're viewing them. And honestly, that scene in the mall made me harken back to Justice League, where there was that cell phone video recording of Superman kind of in the beginning of him interacting with the kids, and how that was like representative of how Superman is a symbol almost more so than he is a hero. And Wonder Woman, on the other hand, kind of staying out of the spotlight and not really becoming a beacon of anything and just helping people in need is so interesting, because it's almost like everybody wants to be a brand, a personality, a symbol. But Diana doesn't want that. She just wants to help people. And I thought that was really cool. And really, she does become a symbol, but only for the people who she has personally helped, which I think, is interesting, and a really interesting commentary on the way that we kind of make these make people into symbols and into icons. It's interesting. As for Wonder Woman 3, I have a great feeling that Cheetah will return, especially because Barbara never took back her first wish. And hear me out here. So her original wish was to be like Diana, and that was made using actually the physical stone. But then she made a second wish using Max, which was obviously to be an apex predator. And that wish had to be taken back, obviously, because when Max took his wish back, it undid all the wishes everyone made via him. It's kind of like wishception. But Barbara's original wish wasn't made via Max, so she technically could have remained immortal and can definitely show up in the third movie. I hope in the third movie we can see them work together, and I definitely want Diana to go back to Themyscira. I want her to find Themyscira again. I think that would be perfect. And Gal says she wants it to take place in the present, which I definitely agree. As much as I love, the war movie that Patty made and then the 80s movie that Patty made, I definitely want a Wonder Woman movie set in the present. I think it'd be really cool. I also thought Gal was really awesome in this movie. Diana's helplessness was so on point, and her performance during the scene where she had to take back her wish was so heartbreaking. I mean, I cried in the theater so hard. Yeah, so I really, really, really enjoyed this movie. I just kind of wanted to hit on the things that I really liked about it, kind of talk about some of my, not theories, but just some of the reasoning that I have created to, kind of back up this movie and defend it a bit from people who maybe didn't like it as much. I had people saying to me that it was like anti-feminist. I had people saying that it was, like just as bad as Supergirl with Mon-El. I'm like, guys, what movie are you watching? Because it definitely was not any of that. It was not. It just, I think that is a very surface level interpretation of this movie. And I think not even, because it just, none of that is right. But yeah, so definitely let me know what you think about Wonder Woman. I really enjoyed it, obviously. Let me know if you liked it. You can leave me a comment down below, or you can tweet me at TelevisedPod and let me know what you think. And yeah, like, share, rate, subscribe, do all the things. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.